Okay, welcome back. We've got our project. It's coming along. We're actually almost through the planning stage, almost ready for execution. And what we need to do is we need to start considering our resources, particularly where those resources are over allocated, or we need to adjust our schedule to better accommodate our resource constraints. And so that's what we want to do today. We're going to look at these resource over allocations and see what it is we can do about it and how Microsoft Project enables us to figure out what we can or can't do to fix our issues with our resources. So we're back in our project. We're looking at our bathroom renovation. And the first thing I want to do is kind of walk you through some of the indicators that you have an issue with resource constraints or over allocations, and where some of that information is contained and where you might be able to draw out some of the essential information so that we can then go on to solve it by resource leveling. So we're here in our Gantt view, and right off the bat, you probably noticed as we put in our resources that over here in the indicator bar, we have a small icon, which is really just an indicator of resource over allocation. So I've gone ahead and hovered over top of it, and you can see the warning that it gives you. It says this task has over allocated resources. It doesn't tell you what it is or which one it is, but it certainly tells you or cautions you that that particular task can't really be scheduled the way it is right now based on a resource issue. And so we see here that we have four of them, four tasks that we're going to have to resolve in order to be able to come up with a schedule which is more than just optimistic fiction, where we actually have the resources at the right time, right place in order to be able to execute our project as planned. So there are a couple other views that give us great resource information that we want to have a look at. So the first one, if we just go down and we look at the resource sheet, you'll see that every resource that is over allocated is got that same indicator in the indicator bar and is bolded and red to indicate that it is over allocated somewhere in the project. We just don't know where at this stage, or we'd have to go back to the other view in order to figure out where it is. And so we know that we have issues with our number of laborers and our number of finishers. So one of the pieces of key information that you want to keep in the back of your mind is how many of those resources do you have in your pool. And we'll see that information come forward in other places. In this case, we only have one of each. And so that's one of those critical pieces of information that we're going to have to use in order to resolve our problem. So the other place that we want to go have a look at is we can go down and look at our resource usage, again, by bringing it up over here on the left-hand side. And we see all of our resources listed down the left-hand side. And then we can see how much each of them is allocated at different times. And of course, wherever there is an over allocation, it's showing up in red. So if I want to get a little bit more information, I can go up here to format, and I can choose, say, what is the actual work? And it will put in the actual work. That's not really going to help us right now, but how much of this assigned work is actually over allocation? And so if I choose over allocation, if we go down to our laborers, for example, they're scheduled for 16 hours, of which 8 hours is an over allocation. So I have 8 hours, which I can accommodate, but I'm going to have to do something with that extra 8 hours. And so that's a nice way to get a little bit of information. You could also use remaining availability and that type of thing. And this is a pretty good chart because it's also starting to tie in with the Gantt chart, and you can see where those resources are over allocated in time. Now, the other view that I want to show you is the resource graph. And this is one that I use quite a bit. And so basically, let me make it a little bit, I'm going to change the scale here. I'm going to double click up here in the timeline up at the top. Go to my bottom tier, it's in days, and I'm going to shrink it down so I can see a little bit more of my project. Okay. And if I go over here to the resource, so right now it's showing the project manager, who is assigned, as you remember, about 15% of the time to the overall project. So this is the full duration of the project. And if I roll my scroll wheel down here, we can see the different resources, and I can just scroll all the way through them. Now, if I stop at the laborer, we can see that on these very specific days, we've gone over our allocation. So we only have one available from our pool, remember that from the resource sheet. And so we've actually assigned work for 2 laborers on this date and this date. And all the other time are below the line, which is our pool, our available resources. And anything below that shows up in blue, and everything above it shows up in red. So if I continue to scroll down, we can see our carpenters assigned, our electricians. And then when we get down to our finishers, again, we see that we have this over allocation coming in this 3-day period right here. And so we're going to have to accommodate that. Now, where the resource graph view really comes into value, let me go back to our Gantt chart. I can split my screen. Now, there's a couple ways you can split the screen. You can just hit on detail. So if you're in your view, you can clip on details. That'll split the screen, bring up one of the sheets down here, and then we can change the sheet. And I'm going to choose the resource graph for the bottom half. Now keep in mind what this does now is that this is a subset based on whatever is selected in the top half. So for example, if I was interested only in the tasks of the finish work, I would highlight those tasks. And then this would deal with resources, and I can scroll through the resources that are assigned to those particular tasks. Okay, and this is a great view when it comes to getting that integration between when the tasks are occurring, where the resources are assigned, and where the resources are over allocated because of those various assignments. So the couple things I'm going to do just to change, I'm going to change this to the leveling Gantt because it offers up a little bit more specific information, which is going to be useful to us when it comes to leveling. And then I'm going to do as I did before with the resource graph, is I'm going to change the time scale so I can see a little bit more of my project. There we go. Bottom tier, days 1, and bring this down to, I don't know, 110. I can do a little bit better than that. Get it figured out so that I can see pretty much my whole project. Try about 95. Close enough. It's going to allow us to see the whole project, and I'm going to scroll. I can scroll left and right as I work through my project. And one thing to note is I have made some changes. So I did, like I changed my Gantt chart on my template to the grid lines and what the various bar formats look like. I've done the same thing here to meet my personal desires. And so if yours looks a little bit different, don't worry about it. If you like the way mine looks, you now know from how to set up your template, how to choose those very specific things. You can make those changes here and save them back to your template, and you'll get them the same all the time. And if you don't remember that, I did make a video on it, so I'll put a link up here in the corner, and you'll be able to follow along if you want, or go back to that video to see how that is done. So one of the useful things to do is up here in the task, remember that this is a subset of what is selected up in the top, is we could make a subset, like this is a fairly small project, and so we'll work on it with all of the tasks showing. But if this was a really big project, you'd want to get down to a subset. So you may want to filter what is in this view. So if I go up here and I go to view, and then I can choose on my filter, and I could say, for example, using a resource, and now I can choose a particular resource. So we know that our laborers and our finishers are an issue. Let's say we want to deal with our laborers. We can only show tasks that have laborers assigned to them, And so we're going to get a subset of everything that is here. And we could deal with the labor over allocations. Now, to show that, so we have all of these chosen. If I come down here and I scroll down, now I can see where it is that my laborers are over allocated, so I can start to figure out what I have to do to rectify it. And again, this is why this is such a great view when it comes to figuring out these over allocations. So anyway, I'm going to go back. So I'm going to remove the filter so that we're not doing that. I'm just going to go to no filter. It's a small project. We don't have a lot of tasks. And so it's going to be just as easy to work on it from here. So we're in this leveling Gantt. And what the leveling Gantt does is it's your Gantt chart. But what it's going to do is it's going to show me any delays that arrive as a result of leveling choices that we make. So when we level the resources, effectively what we have to do is we have to bring all of those red components that are above the line, and we have to make a variety of choices. We have different things we can do in order to bring them below the line so that we don't have more than our pool of available resources being employed or called upon at any one time. It's kind of like playing Tetris, as we have to rearrange it and reorganize our schedule so that the resources are available when we need them. So to achieve this, there are a number of things that we can do. We can change our available resources. So what is the pool of available resources that are currently over allocated? Can we hire more laborers or more finishers in this case? And that would be one way to go about it. It may or may not be effective depending on how broad the problem is for our particular project. We could choose a different way to execute the tasks. So right now we're doing this with in-house labor for these particular tasks. But it may be that you choose to go to contract. And by substituting a different method of execution, you can avoid the resource allocation challenge. And so that's one method that you could use to avoid a resource over allocation, is to change the manner in which we're going to execute a particular task. For the most part, if we have the right resources assigned to it, there's a number of things that we can consider. First one is we can start to change the duration of particular tasks to try to buy us some room. And there's two ways to do that. We can assign more resources to make them shorter, or less resources but take more time to do it. And you would have to consider the trade-offs, the advantages and disadvantages of those. Because some resources or some tasks, not all, might be achievable with fewer resources, but just take a longer period of time. For the most part, when it comes down to the leveling of a task, assuming you've got the right resources assigned and the right amount of work and duration, and you don't want to crash the project by assigning overtime or something like that, which is obviously going to cost the project money, most leveling is executed by delaying the task until the resources are available for them to be done. And so that's what we call the leveling delay. And so in this particular view, when we add leveling delay, it will show as a bar on here. And I've adjusted how that formats a little bit, but effectively it allows me to trade off both slack for leveling delay and everything else. And so over here in the sheet view, we do see this extra column called leveling delay, which is probably our easiest way to do it. So let's see conceptually what it is that we're trying to do. Okay, so the first task that I want to address with regards to overallocation is the one around drywall. And when I'm looking at this task, I see I've got an issue with the number of finishers that I have assigned. I have 2 assigned to do it. So when I envisioned the task, when I was doing my estimating, I imagined doing it with 2 finishers, and thus in my assessment that would take 3 days. But I only have 1 finisher. So arguably, if I want them to do all of the work, I'm probably going to take 6 days, assuming a linear relationship in the work to labor, if I assign just that 1 finisher. So that's one option. I can take the delay there and fix that resource allocation issue. But, I'm going to get a little bit out of the box. So I happen to know that our laborer is, been with us for a long time and is more than capable of working as a trades helper when given the appropriate supervision. So if I can assign the laborer in lieu of the second finisher, I think that I don't have to actually take a delay at all to overcome that particular challenge. So I think that's the path I want to walk. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to address this particular task, and I'm going to do that by swapping out a laborer for a finisher. Now, the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to just double click on my details task here to bring up the detail bar. And so we see the resources listed for that task, which I had already chosen up here. I may as well just change my view so that I can see it all. Go up here, entire project. Okay, so what I need to do is I'm going to reduce the finisher, but I'm going to add a laborer. So let's add the laborer. And I need to be careful here to make sure that the amount of work being done is the same. So I'm changing out the resources to do the same amount of work. And so I add the laborer, and they're going to work for 3 days. And so 3 days times 8 hours is 24 hours worth of work. I should tell it hours, 24 hours worth of work. And that's going to be in lieu of the finishers. So I can drop that down to 1 and make that 24 hours worth of work. So a bit of a manual intervention to swap out the resources doing the same amount of work. So we still have 48 hours worth of work. We're just going to do it with 1 laborer and 1 finisher. And if I hit OK, we see up here on the Gantt chart, we're down to 1 finisher. We've added 1 laborer. The duration hasn't changed because it's 24 hours total worth of work per resource. And so if I go back and bring up my resource graph, I'm just going to drag that down here a little bit so I can see the overall project. So now I need to fix my bottom tier, 1 days, and I think, what did we say that was? 95 gives us a good view. And we're not talking drywall, we're talking finishers. And so what we see here is that we fixed most of the over allocation for this task, but we still have one finisher issue, and that's because of the coincidence of the drywall critical task with the non-critical floor tiling, which also requires that resource to work on it. So may as well try to figure that out. So the normal way, so once you've figured out that your task is actually planned to be executed the way it should be, and you're not going to fiddle internally within the task resources, work duration relationship, your only real option, and the way we normally deal with leveling resources, is to delay 1 or more tasks until the resources are available to work on those tasks, right? So we're just trying to shift it. And really what we're trying to do is we're trying to take this over allocation in red, and we're going to try to drop it down. Think of it as a big Tetris game where you're just trying to move your blocks left and right so that it will drop down below the line. Now, we have this space below the line here, but when I look up on my schedule, I see that's a Saturday, Sunday. So that's normally non-working time. So I could do that. I could still drop it in below the line there, but the only way I would be able to do that is if I approved overtime for that task. And depending on the importance of any project delay or anything else, that might be exactly the choice that I have to do. That being said, if I want to delay it after the task is done, so we have the drywall and the small tiles, so I would have to delay it out, 1, 2, 3, 4 days, and that would push it to Monday. And then because of the causal relationship with the floor tiling, that's going to push that all out. So I'm going to suffer some delay, but that should drop this red bar down in, well, it'll drop it down in here, but push all of that right. So let's see if we can do that. And Visually, I want to show you how to think about this. It is basically all I'm doing is I'm taking my task, which has got the constraint, and I'm going to slide it right, and I'm just going to drag and drop it, and I'm going to drop it in here. I'm going to move the task, but keep the link. I'm going to say OK, and voila. I've been able to play that game of Tetris. I've been able to move that over allocation below the line. Now, the manner in which I did that is not the best way, because any further changes are going to be poorly reflected, because I've taken a constraint and I've hard-coded it in, and so the program isn't really in a great spot to interpret future changes, and we're better off to use the leveling delay field rather than adding a constraint. You can tell we added a constraint over here. We see the little icon. We have a start note earlier than, so it's not going to let this start any earlier. So if we had changes which were permissive later on, maybe we finish things earlier, that constraint will restrict it from moving and shifting with the project. So I'm going to hit my undo, go back to where we were, and the manner in which we're going to encode this is I'm going to go up to my task for the floor tiling, and I'm going to go to the leveling delay field, and I'm just going to say add a leveling delay of 4 days. And we achieve the same thing without that constraint being added. Now, so this is the beauty of the leveling Gantt chart. We see this gold line here, and so that's the leveling delay. It's showing me the decision that I made to manage that over allocation. And so this is great because we can see the impact of the decisions, and we know in the future, if things change, what we can do to fix it. And so when I look over, so my floor tiling is completely, we have no over allocation anymore in our floor tiling. I'm going to go back. So I see drywall, radiant floor, and we have the demolish existing thing. And okay, so that's labor. So all of this is labor. So I've completely fixed or accommodated the over allocation of finishers, but I've still got a labor over allocation, and I've actually introduced an extra labor over allocation because of the assigning my laborer to the drywall, and that really does demonstrate some of the interdependencies of the various resources. Leveling one resource may actually cause you issues in another resource, and so we're going to have to go through some iterations to try to find the best path. Now, I will tell you, and I'll show you before the end of the video, that there are some automated AI-empowered leveling tools that come with Microsoft Project. And I got to say, I'm not necessarily a huge fan. I'll talk more about it later when I demonstrate them or show them to you where you can find them. I think the effort of going through this manually, assuming that your project is small enough that it's possible to go through this manually, teaches you so much about the project and its interdependencies and resource dependencies that when you're in a much better position, you're better equipped to manage the nuances and the challenges that are going to pop up during execution, because you know your project inside out. If you simply hit a button to allow the program to level it, one, you're not going to get a great resolution to your challenges, and two, you're not going to necessarily have the same level of insight into the interdependencies of your project itself, but more on that later. So we need to fix our labor challenges, and so we really have two of them. We have the demolish the existing bathroom, and we have the overlap of the labor being used during the drywall and the, radiant floor. So let's go up to the first one and let's look at the demolition. So this is similar to what we dealt with the first time. So I see that I have 2 laborers assigned. I know I only have 1 laborer in the pool. Clearly, I don't have adequate resources. I'm not going to assign one of the tradesmen to that job. Okay, so I think I have to accept the delay there. So the best way to do that would be just to reduce the amount of resources, and I'm going to let the program compensate for the duration. So I'm just going to go to the assign resources, bring up my field, look at it here. So if I reduce 2 laborers to 1, click out, assign that, and I see the caution over here, and it's telling me what it's doing by choice and gives me an option to change it, change the duration, but keep the amount of work the same, which is what we want to do. So I accept that, and we see that it is now extended out over 2 days. The duration is 2 days, and we've extended our project by a day. But we've gotten rid of the over allocation right here. Okay, so that takes care of that, but now we're going to have to deal with this mess. And we down here, and we see that we've actually made things a little bit worse because of the way it uses elapsed days for the leveling delay. By delaying the demolition, we've actually caused ourselves a little bit more of a problem. But let's finish up with the laborers. So let's look at the resources here. I'm going to go up, look at the laborers. And remember, we assigned the labor in lieu of a finisher to our drywall task, which leaves our radiant floor task with an overlap, calling on the laborer. So when I look at this, I think our best bet is we can delay that task into this space right after the drywall is done, and that should drop this resource, this red box here, down here, where it will become blue. So I'm going to go to the delay, and I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 days and see if what that does. And that completely takes care of our labor issue. Now, I notice on my indicator bar, I don't have any icons for over allocations, and so I've actually taken care of all of my over allocations. But before I finish, I just want to look at, and in coming up with this plan, I'm looking at the delay associated with my radiant in floor, which we set at 4 days. But right now, I think it's too long. It doesn't need to be as long as it is because of this delay added in here. So the 3 days I've added in here, I think I can take away from this. So instead of 4 days down here, let's see if I go back to 1 and I still don't have any over allocations. And so I think I've got probably my most efficient plan that I'm able to come up with. Let's just get the view so I can see everything. Okay. Slide this down. And so that looks pretty good. I'm not seeing anything that causes me any concerns. So I'm going to create an over allocation just so I can show you some things. So let's get rid of this 1 day on number 16 on the floor tiling, and that will cause an over allocation. Now remember when we hovered over this icon in the indicator bar, if I right click, it offers me a couple different options. The first one is Fix in Task Inspector. Now this will open up a window down here to the side, and it will offer you some options depending on what it is that is causing the delay. And if that makes sense, you could just choose it. So often what it is move the task to the resource to the next available time. And so it will look automatically within the calendar, find out when it thinks the next resource available time is, and take the move. Again, I still encourage you to do these things manually because it gives you a great depth of understanding and appreciation for the challenges in your project. But this is a great way to understand what your various options are likely to be. We can close that just by pressing on the X. The other one is it might, without going all the way to the task inspector, you can do some of these actions. It will offer them to you in the shortcut menu as you hit the right click on that indicator. The other place to go is in resources, and we can go to leveling options. So there is a tool by which we can automatically level our project. And so we go to our leveling options, and this allows us to make choices and refinements on how we want it to level. Obviously, like for example, if we chose level only within available slack, that would be ideal. We already know that's not going to work in this case. I got to say, I know I said it earlier, I've not ever found the choices that the AI make adequate for me. I typically am frustrated by it. You can cause it to split tasks, not split tasks, do all sorts of things. If it's possible, if your project is sufficiently or if your project is small enough that you can actually do this by hand, I think it is the far better way. But you can refine it here. You can refine it on the individual task. We'll cancel that. And you can choose to level by a particular resource, which is probably better than trying to level all. Or you can just level all and then you'll be offered whether you level the whole project or don't. And so there are some automatic tools that you can use. Again, I think they come with their own challenges and setbacks. Certainly, if you can figure it out and do it by hand, I think you're going to be better set for a healthy execution of your project. So that's about what I wanted to show. I mean, we can select all of our project and we can go down here and we can go through all of our resources. We can see they're all leveled and we're ready to go. We're ready to set our baseline. So let's call this one quits. It probably went quite a bit longer than I thought it would. We'll come back. We're going to set our baseline. It'll serve as the milestone to transition our project from project planning into project execution, controlling and monitoring, and get ready for the next big step. So hope you enjoyed that. I hope you got something out of it, and we'll see you on the next video, very short one where we set our baseline.